presidential primary, why the frontrunners could suffer setbacks in Wisconsin. Pro-life politics, how the issue is shaping the campaign. President Obama on corporate taxes, his plan to keep the money in the U.S. And national championship, a Catholic high school's connection with last night's NCAA buzzer beater. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, April 5th, 2016. Good evening from Washington. Thanks for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick, and the road to the White House goes through Wisconsin. Political Director Lauren Ashburn says today's presidential primary there may shake up the status quo.
Voters in Wisconsin could put a damper on presidential front-runners' momentum. Polls show Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton losing to Ted Cruz and Bernie Sanders.
I don't want to get Hillary Clinton more nervous than she already is. She's already under a lot of pressure.
Clinton has more delegates, but her campaign is downplaying expectations for a win in Wisconsin.
We always knew it was going to be tight. I think Wisconsin, to some degree, favors Senator Sanders.
Donald Trump returned to the campaign trail early this morning, trying to win over Wisconsin voters.
We could have a big surprise tonight, folks. Big surprise. This feels like South Carolina. This feels like New Hampshire. I think you're going to have a big turnout. You're going to have a great surprise today.
Cruz believes he's the only Republican who can beat Trump and bring the party together.
We are seeing the full ideological range. We are seeing coming together Republicans and independents and libertarians and Reagan Democrats unifying behind this campaign.
One thing Trump and Cruz agree on, John Kasich needs to go. Kasich is expecting a loss in Wisconsin, but says he's staying on the campaign trail.
Why would I get out when I'm the only person, number one, who beats Hillary in the fall?
Meanwhile, in a surprise appearance in the briefing room, President Obama took a swipe at Donald Trump. The president's purpose in talking to the press was to tout the Treasury Department's third round of restrictions limiting companies trying to escape the U.S. tax net. President Obama says he is all for business making a profit, but not at the expense of the middle class. This practice is known as tax inversion. American companies purchase smaller ones in a foreign country, move their tax address to get a lower tax rate.
They are gaming the system. Middle-class families are not in the same position to do this. In fact, a lot of these loopholes come at the expense of middle-class families because that lost revenue has to be made up somewhere. Alternatively, it means that we're not investing as much as we should in schools, in making college more affordable, in putting people back to work, rebuilding our roads, our bridges, our infrastructure.
Turning to politics, in response to a question, President Obama said several foreign leaders are concerned about Republican presidential candidate proposals, like building a wall between Mexico and the U.S.
It's not just Mr. Trump's proposals. I mean, you're also hearing concerns about Mr. Cruz's proposals, which in some ways are just as draconian when it comes to immigration, for example.
No reaction from Republican candidates. President Obama hopes the Treasury Department's latest actions will help deter deals, but acknowledges the administration can't do it alone. He urged Congress to step up and close these loopholes for the benefit of the U.S. economy and the middle class. Brian.
Thanks, Lauren Ashburn at the White House. Other stories our EWTN News Nightly team is covering in today's world. Republican Senate leaders aren't budging on their stance against hearings for President Obama's Supreme Court pick, but that's not stopping Judge Merrick Garland from visiting two GOP senators today. Capitol Hill reporter Jason Calvi was there. Jason?
Brian, during the two-week Easter break, liberal activists targeted Republicans saying, do your job, meaning have a hearing for Chief Judge Garland. But today, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says those pleas are not being heard. Most Republicans are standing firm. No votes, no hearings.
Hi, Judge.
Judge Merrick Garland meets today with Maine Republican Susan Collins.
Now we have to be careful not to say anything, right?
But after the more than 1 hour long private meeting, Collins did speak.
I brought up issues ranging from Second Amendment cases to executive overreach, and he gave very thorough impressive responses to all of my questions.
Collins is one of only 2 Republican senators to call for Garland hearings.
The meeting left me more convinced than ever that the process should proceed.
The other is Illinois Republican Senator Mark Kirk in a tough re-election bid. Kansas Republican Senator Jerry Moran earlier said there should be hearings, but he reversed after conservative backlash. Judge Garland also met today with 3 other senators, including Arkansas Republican John Bozeman, who's also up for re-election.
I think any Republican who has a meeting with any Obama nominee is playing right into the hands of the White House.
Members of the conservative group Freedom Works sent 1.44 million messages to Senate Republicans, including more than 48,000 to Senator Collins. Their message is simple: no votes, no hearings.
The meetings are a bad idea simply because, meetings lead to hearings, which leads to votes. It's the important thing to remember also is that this is not about the nominee himself. This is about the process.
But a Monmouth University poll last month found that 2/3 of Americans support having at least a hearing for Judge Garland. Progressive Catholics sent a letter to Leader McConnell urging a hearing, while conservatives over at Catholic Vote have a petition going saying no hearing, no vote. Brian?
Jason Calvi on Capitol Hill. Thank you, Jason. California and New York pushed their minimum wage to $15 an hour, the highest in the nation. The question now, should Congress enact a new federal minimum wage? Wyatt Goolsby reports.
Democrats are cheering on New York's Governor Andrew Cuomo, who signed a law that will gradually raise his state's minimum wage to $15. California's governor signed a similar law this week.
Work is not just an economic equation, but work is part of living in a moral community. And a worker is worthy of his or her hire, and to be worthy means they can support a family.
President Obama says Congress should also raise the federal minimum wage, but business owners in California warn higher wages will cost thousands of jobs.
By the math, if we didn't come up with some other solution, I would have to fire almost everybody in the store and work all the hours myself. There's going to be a lot of unintended consequences from this.
Stephen White studies Catholic issues at the Ethics and Public Policy Center in Washington, D.C.
The idea that there's a one-size-fits-all solution for what minimum wage should be for the whole country is a little bit tougher sell, especially when you start getting into higher numbers.
White says from a Catholic perspective, there's no magic number. He says it may be worth Congress waiting to see how it all plays out in New York and California.
The best thing that can be done is for employers and employees to realize that that our labor isn't simply a commodity. This is something that people need to do to survive, to support their families, and that they ought to be paid something that will allow them to do that.
California Governor Jerry Brown says his state can absorb the raise in wages without the problems predicted by opposing Republicans. But an economics professor at the University of California, Irvine, estimates the move could cost 5 to 10% of low-skilled workers their jobs. Brian?
All right. Thank you, Wyatt. And the war on terror has no beginning and no end. That, according to testimony during today's Homeland Security Committee hearing. Senators met to discuss the recent European terror attacks.
We will have to pursue special operations force attacks, aggressive joint terrorism task force investigations here in the States, and robust intelligence sharing across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East for as long as we live.
One person called to testify says European investigators missed opportunities to foil the recent terror attacks in Brussels. Senators say the FBI has already interrupted some terror plots against the U.S., but we all need to remain vigilant. PayPal cancels plans to bring 400 new jobs to North Carolina. This is a protest of a new state law signed last month by Governor Pat McCrory. It requires using public restrooms based on the sex listed on a person's birth certificate. PayPal's move is the biggest tangible economic backlash to the state law so far. More than 100 corporate heads claim the law makes it difficult to attract talent to North Carolina. Supporters of that law accuse big business of cultural bullying.
What we're seeing right now is that the corporate interests are lining up with the cultural left. They're picking sides in a culture war, and big businesses said they're on the sides of the progressives, they're on the sides of the liberals, and they're now using their outsized market share to exert economic pressure to have the government impose their cultural value.
Dr. Anderson says North Carolina should enact policy to best serve the people, not special interests. Mississippi Governor Phil Bryant signs a controversial religious objections bill today. It allows government employees and businesses to choose not to serve same-sex couples based on religious beliefs about marriage. Several hundred protesters rallied outside the governor's mansion in Jackson on Monday. They claim the bill will permit discrimination against lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people. Supporters say the bill protects religious freedom, and they say those who believe in marriage as a union of a husband and wife have been penalized by the government. A bill to limit abortions in Mississippi now awaits the governor's signature. It outlaws dilation and evacuation abortions which dismember the unborn child. That type of abortion would only be allowed to prevent irreversible physical impairment to the mother. Marjorie Dannenfelser is with us. She's president of Susan B. Anthony List. The Mississippi House voted overwhelmingly for that bill. Do you expect it to become law?
Yes, we do. It'll reach the governor's desk very soon, and we do expect it to become law. It'll be a great point of education, frankly, for the nation to watch that bill come into law, to find out what's actually happening in an abortion. The name itself says what it is.
So there have been successes at the state level.
Yes.
Almost daily we report on something. What must the federal government do, though?
Well, I think it's a really important question because right now in the presidential campaign, there is a lot of back and forth about what states should do and what the federal government can do. The states should always do what they can to protect the unborn in their states. But the federal government stands as a teacher of the law for our nation, and they should be taking a stand on at least the most minimal standards for what we ought to be doing, and that is, at a minimum, protecting children after 20 weeks. It should be more than that. But so that should be a question that presidential candidates are hearing over and over. What is the federal responsibility when it comes to protecting the unborn child? Very much connected to the Supreme Court and the battle that you handled very well a little while ago on the program.
Yeah. Abortion law is set and should stay that way, according to Republican candidate Donald Trump. Is he backing away from a pro-life stance?
Look, that's one of 5 positions that he took in the same number of days. And so I think the truth of the matter is that he began this conversation 5 days ago not thinking deeply about something that is very important, very deep, very fundamental to the nation and written in the Constitution. I think that he keeps saying things like this, recovering the next day, saying a new thing that is very difficult, like only the states should do this, and then perhaps when I'm president I will be able to handle the problem and I'll do it well. The problem is we need declarative language that is resolute about what he will do. I think that one thing is very clear is that he has done a pretty poor job when you really when you compare it to the rest of the candidates.
Democrat Hillary Clinton made a very interesting statement. Listen to this.
When or if does an unborn child have constitutional rights?
Well, under our laws currently, that is not something that exists. The unborn person doesn't have constitutional rights.
Unborn person, that's the first time she said that.
This is a breakthrough moment. It truly is. I think there's something she has in common with Trump, meaning she makes statements that are completely contradictory. She said also that feminists can be pro-life. What in the world does that mean if it's the death of a child? So she's saying the unborn person, not the fetus, has no rights up until birth. This is something most of the nation does not know about her position.
She reaffirmed that on The View, by the way, on ABC.
Amen.
Marjorie Dannenfelser, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up, Catholic schools in the NCAA Championship Spotlight. What makes their programs unique? And supporting Catholic students on a secular campus. Alabama head football coach Nick Saban on his support for a new student center. For me, Mother Angelica represents hope for the church. It was a gift she had to live according to the faith, the humorous but always serious way, tackling things, conveying the image of a forward-looking church, always facing Christ. A comment from an EWTN viewer in Germany on the life of our foundress, Mother Angelica. Thanks for joining us on this Tuesday evening. I'm Brian Patrick, and the Alabama State Legislature passes a resolution today honoring Mother Angelica. She is the only woman in television history to found and lead a cable network for 20 years. Mother died Easter Sunday and was laid to rest this past Friday at her monastery in Hanceville, Alabama. Hanceville Mayor Kenneth Nail and others were in Montgomery when the resolution was passed with a moment of silence. That resolution says her death leaves a void in the lives of countless individuals worldwide whose lives she positively impacted through her meritorious work and spiritual teaching. Tennessee lawmakers vote to make the Holy Bible the state's official book. Republican State Senator Steve Szeltner says his bill recognizes the Bible for its historical and cultural contributions to the state. Opponents argue the Bible will be trivialized by being placed alongside other state symbols like the official tree or the state rock. Republican Governor Bill Haslam hasn't said yet if he'll sign the bill. Villanova becomes the first Catholic university to win an NCAA men's basketball championship in more than 30 years. Catherine Szeltner tells us about a fascinating tie between the stars of both teams in Monday's championship game.
3 seconds at midcourt. Jenkins gives it to Jenkins for the championship.
Men's college basketball had a grand finale last night with Villanova's Chris Jenkins' buzzer-beating shot. Before becoming a college basketball star, Jenkins sharpened his skills on the court at Gonzaga High School in D.C.
I'm just a proud coach and just like a proud dad because he's just like one of my own kids.
But Jenkins wasn't his only kid on the court last night. UNC rival Nate Britt is another Gonzaga alum. The two players were brothers on the high school court and at home. Britt's parents became Jenkins' legal guardians in 2007 because of a complicated home situation.
It's a special bond that the two of them have. They're truly like blood brothers.
The all-boys high school provided Jenkins, Britt, and their other athletes a Catholic foundation.
Coaches at Gonzaga High School say it's the hard work, determination, and character building that ultimately leads to their athletes' success.
I try my best to teach life lessons through basketball.
He did win the Gatorade Player of the Year, DC Gatorade Player of the Year.
Gonzaga's athletic director says they train players to be champions and good Christians.
Well, I think we teach them, the values through sports, teach them values of sportsmanship, how to win, how to lose, be a good person, do the right thing.
Villanova's team chaplain says their clutch player still holds on to those values.
I can tell you quite honestly and quite personally, Chris Jenkins is a person of faith. He has been just a good brother to these men.
It's a faith-filled fraternal bond Jenkins learned early in his life. Catherine Szeltner, EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you, Catherine. What a great story. From the hardwood to the gridiron, the Catholic faith runs strong among championship teams. We're joined by Nick Saban, head football coach at the University of Alabama. Coach, it's great to have you with us. Does your Catholic faith play into the success of you coaching college football players into champions? You've done this 5 times now.
I don't think there's any question about the fact that character, moral development are all a part of leadership and getting people to do the things that you want them to do. And I look at it like we always say, God have mercy. But that mercy is not a well, it's not a cistern, it's a channel that should run through us to other people. And, that's a part of what we try to do for our players so that they have a chance to be more successful in life.
There's a new student center going up on the campus there. What role have you played in supporting that? It will bear your name.
Well, we've tried to help raise money for it as well as making a significant contribution. My wife Terry's very involved in it. We have a lot of Catholic participation by our students here, and we felt it would be great for them to have a place where, they could go socialize and develop the kind of relationships that might be helpful to them and their faith development.
Is the Catholic student population growing there at Bama?
No question. It's growing significantly. We just built a new church, which, on Easter Sunday was standing room only for every Mass. So we're excited about the leadership that we have here and how it's impacting our students.
Well, you set a great example for a lot of folks. You recently visited the White House with your latest championship team. What was that like for your men?
I think it's a great opportunity, obviously, for every young man to have a chance to meet the President of the United States. And President Obama does a really nice job of shaking hands and meeting every player and making them feel welcome and at home. And most of the guys that we have on our team don't get the opportunity to go to Washington, D.C. and, sort of see things that surround the nation's capital, whether it's the Lincoln Memorial, Washington Monument. So it's a really good experience for our team.
Well, Coach, you set a great example, and I know that we appreciate the time that you've spent with us here on EWTN News Nightly. Thank you, Coach Saban.
Well, thank you.
Up next, refugee crisis. The Pope considers a trip to Greece as the first migrants are deported from there. And viewing Pope Francis through a new lens. Father Robert Gahl explains why the Pope is neither right nor left. Today, the 5th of April, is the feast of St. Vincent Ferrer. The Dominican preacher brought thousands into the church during a political and spiritual crisis in Western Europe. St. Vincent, pray for us. Thanks for joining us this Tuesday evening. I'm Brian Patrick. Well, a leaked report claims the site for Pope Francis's World Youth Day Mass in southern Poland is far from ideal. The Government Center for Security report says the planned site lacks proper access and evacuation routes. The document reportedly says rain could turn that site into a swamp. There are also concerns over insufficient medical support for the expected 2 million young people who will attend. Poland's prime minister says that report will be used to improve security and safety for the papal mass. The Vatican is exploring the possibility of Pope Francis traveling to Greece as that country begins deporting migrants back to Turkey. The Holy See press office says no decision has been made and no itinerary planned, but there are ongoing discussions. The migrants are being deported from Greece to Turkey, according to a new European Union agreement. It is meant to discourage migrants from risking their lives trying to reach Europe by sea. The first to be deported are men who did not apply for asylum. The migrants say they will return to Europe, no matter what.
Will you try to come back to Europe if you get sent to Turkey?
Yeah, we will come back to Yunan if we deport to Greece.
As the migrants leave in boats for Turkey, the Greek Coast Guard arrives with new migrants on board, ready to take their place. Pope Francis calls for Christian harmony. Speaking in his homily at this morning's Santa Marta Mass, he says, "Our shared life together may not be tranquil, but we can live in harmony with the Holy Spirit." The Pope says a community united in Christ is courageous. In U.S. politics, everything is seen in terms of the right versus the left. There is the temptation to view Pope Francis's comments about hot-button issues through that same lens. Father Robert Gahl, an ethics professor at the Pontifical University of the Holy Cross, is joining us from Rome. Father, media often looks at the Holy Father and his comments through the lens of politics. What is wrong with that approach?
Sure, right, especially during this political season, the political campaign right now. There's this tendency to see the Pope as, is he on the left, is he on the right? Is he in favor of a free market or is he in favor of redistribution? And this tends to simplify the message of the Pope and really reduce it. The Pope is addressing something much deeper all the time. He's really speaking to us about changing the heart, about conversion.
What guidance does Pope Francis and the Catholic Church give us as we prepare for this year's U.S. elections?
Well, coming up on these elections, of course, we have the traditional teaching of the Catholic Church, which Pope Francis has emphasized. In fact, last year in New York, when he spoke at the United Nations, he spoke of the importance of defending human life. He spoke about the importance of the family, about marriage, about combating the ideological colonization. He also spoke about the difficulty of there being the creation of new rights, and I think he was referring to the gender ideology when he mentioned that. So certainly Americans, as we're approaching the elections, need to take to heart the need that in the elections we seek out candidates who are really in favor of the common good, that have this generosity of heart, that they can put the human person at the center of political affairs, seeking common good, defending marriage, and defending, of course, religious freedom, so that we can all not just worship freely, but also that we can carry out activity in society that has been catalyzed by our faith, by our Christian faith.
And Father, the final report from the Synod on the Family finally due out later this week. What do you expect in that paper?
There's a lot of excitement leading up to Friday with the publication of Amoris Laetitia, the joy of love, the exhortation on the family. Surely the Pope will reaffirm the value of marriage, of fidelity in marriage, and of openness to human life in marriage. But he's at the same time is going to address the crisis that we have in the world and in the church today regarding so many families that have broken apart. And he's going to offer advice and a welcoming message to all of these families who are suffering difficulties so they can come back to a more full participation in the life of the church. And he's also going to offer specific guidelines, surely, which because the Synod itself has proclaimed these guidelines in the final report regarding a more solid preparation for marriage for new couples, and also that they can be helped by the wisdom of older couples who have been living their fidelity in marriage. And of course, the message of mercy and of forgiveness will surely shine forth in the apostolic exhortation.
And we look forward to that release. Father Robert Gahl, thanks for joining us from Rome.
Thank you, Brian.
And thank you for being with us. Until tomorrow, for the EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Brian Patrick. We leave you tonight visiting a new Swiss Guard photo exhibit in the Vatican Museums. Good night, and God bless you.